In this episode, we take a look at two questions which I think have implicitly been answered, or had to have been answered, by Christians throughout the ages who wanted government. And that is, how do we deal with the injustice of government that's inherent to it? And from whence is government's authority derived? And really, the two questions are kind of the same thing, because for a Christian, the injustice of government seems to undermine its legitimacy and its authority. So really, both questions are asking, where does government get its authority? So we took a look first at Edmund Burke, who is famous for basically the concept that says, who watches the watchman? While Burke's piece was satirical, he's basically satirically saying that, well, think about it, like governments are artificial. Like they run basically on violence. They force people to do things. Even democracies force a minority or a small majority to do things, right, by the power of the sword. And then the thing is, like, the people who have all of this power, this concentrated power, have the exact same passions as the masses of people and do the exact same evils, but because they represent all of the people, they actually have a more powerful position to exploit others and to do damage and to do violence, to pursue the same desires and passions and evils that the masses would pursue. But of course, Burke said essentially, well, God watches the watchman, right? And we, Burke's people, Burke's group, who is in power, are kind of God's hand in all of this. So God watches the watchman and takes care of things. But at the same time, you've got this guy, David Hume, who argues for this idea of the consent of the governed. And he asks, how does a king have so much power when he's only one person, and really the masses have all of the power? And he says, well, power basically runs on opinion. So it's ultimately the authority of the people, of public opinion, that allows the king to have his power. And when they decided to revolt, at that point, the king loses his power, or the ruler loses his power. Christendom likes to hold on to these two ideas, that God ordains authority and that democracies are great and authorities are run on the consent of the governed. The problem is, these two things conflict very much, because if God grants authority, then that individual has authority regardless of the consent of the governed. And if they derive their authority by the consent of the governed, then we're talking about relativistic morality and governments getting their authority from the people rather than God. It's a complex issue. I recommend you take a listen to the full episode to hear more. Enjoy.